Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here. We are going to be training tonight. If we haven't met, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, Special Education Boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. I have been a special education advocate for 28 short years. I do about 500 IEP meetings a year. I train advocates nationally, professional development, school districts. So our job is and our heart is to equip everybody for successful student outcomes. But there does come a time where we are not in consensus. We cannot agree on things. We cannot agree on components of the IEP, components of the evaluation, components on next steps or placements. And so I want to give you guys some framework around how to file, when should you file, what predicates filing, what would be the point of filing. And so most filings that are done, and I do federal complaints with U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. I am allowed to represent families in due process hearings in Texas and Florida. I'm a non-attorney advocate, a ton of mediations, a ton of state complaints. And I've learned over the years of doing them wrong, heartfelt, but wrong, what are some good do's and don'ts. And I want to, serve you with those tonight so that if in fact you do need to file a state complaint, if it has any substance, right? When we're looking at violations under the law, we're looking at two things, right? A procedural violation, that's the processes that go into an IEP, and then substantive violations. And so both can be filed on. They have different outcomes. And so I always want parents or guardians or surrogate parents or foster parents that choose to and need to file as part of their procedural rights and safeguards, that they do it effectively, right? There's nothing worse than filing and it's thrown out, or an entity says we don't look at that, or that's not our wheelhouse. And so I want to talk about the types of dispute resolution options that you have, because they are different and they do different things. And so I'll sort of tease them out into 6 areas. So number one is what we would call a district grievance. I would call it a waste of time. It would be a waste of time. I would never do it. I have never seen anybody have anything other than being irritated. I've never found a district that went, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that to our attention. We will rectify that immediately. It gets handed off to some assistant superintendent, very nice man or woman who, yes, thank you for letting us know, and nothing happens. And so I think one of the things that's really important is that when you file, you get one chance to do that, right? And so when you file a district grievance, which is certainly one of your legal options, you've sort of given away your hand. You've given away the components, the facts of the case, the allegations, the denial of faith, the harm. And so I know lots of parents that file district grievances, and there's a level 1, level 2, and then level 3 is when you're just really irritated, right? So I have never found, and my partners can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never found anybody satisfied on the filing end of that. But it's a lot of typing. And so I'm not about typing. I'm all about action and change. So that's your first choice. So a district grievance. Number 2 is a written state complaint, And there's a lot of things that I love about a written state complaint, which is what we're going to train on tonight. I love the turnaround time. I love that it's a quick in and out, but you have to really know what you're doing. Most parents, when they file, whether it's a mediation, a state complaint, a due process, a federal complaint, they file on their experience and how they felt and what they think was wrong. And thinking something's wrong, and something might have actually been wrong, but it's not illegal. It's not a violation. And really, as full-time advocates, there's only about 6 things that we ever really file on. It's pretty tight. Now, each of those things you can open up into certain areas, but it's very important when you file any of your dispute resolution options that you're making sure that you're doing with pristine specificity around the federal code. And so it's important that we do that. If you don't have the federal code, this is it. This is the Office of Federal Register. This is the Title 34, Volume 2 of 4. So this is special education. We have it in a link in our bio. If you go to the Advocates bookshelf on Special Education Academy, you need to have one of these. This is the law. And so it's important that you know what the laws are so that if you're going to file on something, you can attach it to a statute. Okay. So number one is a district grievance. Number two is a state written complaint, which is what we're going to train on tonight. Number three is mediation. I love mediation. I'm actually a certified mediator in Houston in 2 counties for the family courts for high conflict situations because I love a high conflict situation. Lots of great training. If you ever train to be a mediator, it will be very helpful for you if you're a full-time advocate. Mediation is a great component. We're not going to train on that tonight, but it's voluntary from both sides. Either side can request it. The district can request it. The parent can request it. And in my 500 million years of doing mediation, I think all but one time, I believe that the district came with an offer that the parent should have considered. It's not my business. It's not my child. It's not my situation. So I do find almost always that is really a good direction for families and school districts. It's you have complete freedom as the parent, meaning you don't have to accept what they offer. Mediation is sealed. What does that mean? That means whatever happened in the mediation, we don't discuss outside of there. And it gives you some really good opportunities to really talk about the components and the differences where you are in the IEP decisions that were made. Number 4 is going to be a dispute resolution session. So a dispute resolution session is something you can ask for at any time. I could just say, hey, Cora, you're the special ed director in Billings, Montana. Listen, we are really struggling to be successful at these meetings. My client and I would like to request a dispute resolution session with the district to see if we can resolve these matters that we just can't find, consensus on. And so you can ask for that at any time. It's part of the next thing that we're going to talk about, but you can always ask for a dispute resolution session. You can ask the district at any time to go into a meeting to resolve things in good faith and in agreement. What number am I on? Number 4. Was that number 4? Was that number 5? Thank you. I've only had 2 pots of coffee. Number 5 is going to be a due process hearing. A due process hearing. Often people will say, I'm going to sue the school. You're really not suing the school district. So a due process hearing is not voluntary, and you are assigned a hearing officer. There are many legal components of it. I certainly wouldn't go into a due process hearing unless I had a very robust understanding of the procedurals in an administrative hearing, because you're going before a judge. There's going to be a court reporter. There are exhibits. There are disclosures. There are requirements for direct examination and cross-examination, but it's certainly an option for you. It's going to be about $30,000, and it's not going to be fun. You're not going to feel great when it's over. There's never really a win, in that nobody is going to get there and go, Karen is just lovely to be within an IEP meeting. We can't wait to see her again. And those parents are fantastic. And the school's awesome. That is not what happens in a dispute resolution. In a due process hearing, but it's a component that probably 3 or 4 of my clients use annually to exercise their procedural rights and safeguards. And then number 6 which is one of my favorites, is a federal complaint with the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. At any time, I probably have, 100, 650, I have a lot of them open across the United States. We're not training on that tonight. We'll probably do a separate training maybe in a month on that, because it's very different. That is very specific to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So you can go to ocr.ed.gov, the Office of Civil Rights, and you can look at the components that they oversee. It's everything from race to a national origin, to sex, to disability, to retaliation. Those are the components that they oversee. And so sometimes when we see the word disability and it says, was your child discriminated? We're like, yeah, I can say, I didn't get a good evaluation. These are terrible math goals. That is not what they look at. So really, it's important that you understand, if I'm going to file a federal complaint or a state complaint tonight, we're going to talk about state complaints. Which one is going to give me the most bang for my buck, right? Which one is going to bring about the most change? And really, if you're filing, it should be for change for the student, right? And really, when we file, we're looking at two things to fix it, right? That the district gets training and that there's some compensatory offer to bring relief to the student. And so let's talk about state complaints. So state complaints are probably one of the most underutilized parts of the dispute resolution session. I was talking to one of my partners the other day, and while you might be in a district, and I'm sure we can all rattle them off, all the Washington, North Carolina, Washington County, Florida, Seminole County, Topeka, Kansas, just it's not lost on me that it happens everywhere. But if you reach out to your state, to your DOE, your Department of Education, your state education agency, you could say in, Dallas Independent School District in Texas, in the last 5 years, how many state complaints, mediations, and due processes have there been? I think that you would be stunned to see how few there actually are. Because you know what people do? And I'm one of those people. We whine to each other, we complain to each other, and guess what that brings about? Absolutely no change for the student with a disability. It doesn't bring about training for the school district. It doesn't bring about an opportunity to learn a better way to do things. So I really want you to access this. I am very familiar with lots of special education directors for many states. I advocate in every state in America. And they will always say, Karen, people don't complain. And the federal government doesn't really oversee states. I don't know if you figured that out. States don't really oversee school districts. And often school districts don't oversee the campuses. And so we just have some things are not going good in special education. A lot of things are going good in special education, but some things are not. Okay. So we want to make sure that we are doing state complaints that are effective and that can be helpful for the student that we're talking about. So we're talking about filing state complaints that bring about change and that are going to bring about a resolution for a student. And so the first thing that we need to consider is are we at the place to file, right? Sometimes we get new clients, or my partners will get new clients and I want to file. Okay, so the first thing that we ask our clients when we get a new client is we ask them, what do you want, right? What is the district doing well and what do you want? And almost always when we get clients, we can resolve it at the table. The Rowley case in 1982 and Andrew F. in 2017, those could have all been resolved at the IEP table. So that's our first goal. We as advocates and my partner advocates, we rarely file. It takes us a long ways to get to file. We would prefer not to file. We would prefer to stay as a committee and work things out, but that's not always what happens, right? And so what brings us to a place where we feel we have to file? And for me, and I've been in the business a long time, I've got relationships with districts and attorneys, and I will exhaust everything that I know to do in the district. I'll reach out and say, Rhonda, you're the special education director. Can you help me with this, with, the Moses family and this, and you just sort of have to feel that way out, right? Can you help me? And you get to a point in a district where you realize they are committed to their position. And if you really believe that violates IDEA, then I want you to file so that those discrepancies and problems are addressed, because it's not happening in isolation. What's happening at ABC school district is not a coincidence, right? And I talk to teachers all the time. The bulk of the people that are on here tonight are educators. And it's an honor that I get to train y'all. And you guys reach out to us every day, all day long, and beg for help. And I don't know how to help teachers. I hope that they're supported by their district and their superintendents and the directors, and a lot of them are, and a teachers union. But we have teachers asking us, what can we do if we know something's wrong? Can we file? And I'm just going to tell you, love, no. If you want to keep your job, right? I'm not asking anybody to do something to lose their job. I think that if I'm an employee at a school district, I should be able to go to Shannon, the principal, and say, this is happening, and she'll rectify that, right? It's not what we hear from some employees in school districts. So this is really about the parent filing a complaint for a violation under IDEA. Okay, so how did we get there? Really, there's main things that we file on, right? Child find. Child find is the most under-filed on thing that there is, and it's the most egregious violation that we see as partner advocates. And so that would be under 300.111, 300.111, a violation of child find. Child find is the foundation of special education. It says that the district is charged with ILE, identifying, locating, and evaluating children with suspected disabilities. And I know as we sit in meetings now with parents, it's we're making them prove there's a disability, right? So if a parent or a doctor or a professional or a therapist or a teacher says, I suspect this child may have a disability, that triggers child find. So if you go to the school and you ask for testing because there's an educational need, and Bob, the principal, says, we're not going to do that, we're going to keep an eye on him, we're going to do some MTSS, some RTI, some UPS, some FedEx, I don't know what they're doing, then they've violated their obligation under child find. And so that is something that you can file a state complaint with, because often we will have parents that we get as clients that have been told, hang on for 6 months, 6 years. And the parent has been asking all along. And so when you are denied testing, initial testing, you want to make sure that you're asking the district for this, that you're asking for your PWN. If you're taking notes, write this down. Anytime you end a meeting, and you're in agreement or disagreement, we're in love, we're on the love boat, we are not on the love boat, we're not on Lido deck, you want that prior written notice. And that is 7 components that the district has to fill out to meet their obligation of why they started an act or did not do an act around placement, evaluations, and all decisions in the IEP meeting. So if you go into the school and say, hey, Mr. Bob, the principal, I'd like testing for my student, he has for my child, and he says, no, we're not going to do that, make sure that you get that prior written notice. Okay. And that's going to be a component that you would file on. So that's probably the very first thing that we hear from clients is that I've been asking for testing for years. Get it in writing, get it in writing. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Don't talk to them at the pumpkin patch. Don't talk to them at the book fair. Get it in writing. Email them as writing. Okay. So that's the number one thing that we would have clients file for if they were denied that. Next is going to be evaluations. The second thing that we file on evaluations is that we are allowed to have evaluations that are robust, that address the student's specific needs. I think we get a little confused in the language where it says, we test for suspected disabilities. It doesn't say we only test on the disability we suspect. That's not what it says. It says we test for suspected disabilities. And so testing does one of two things. It identifies or eliminates. We want both of those things. So when you're asking for testing, you certainly want to ask for all 8 areas, and they are speech and language to include pragmatic, sociological, medical, physical, a full cognitive evaluation, all 7 Gs, formal achievement to include reading, writing, math, oral expression, and listening comprehension, formal adaptive behavior, a full psychological evaluation, and any related service under IDEA or instructional service. And this will be recorded so you can slow it down to your own pace. But we ask for those evaluations. And so once a child is already in special education and a parent asks for testing that has not occurred, or it's outside of 365 days, the school cannot legally deny you that testing once they're already in special education. So that is something that we file on. And so it's important that we know what the school's obligation is. It can sound very convincing if you're a parent when you're told no, because I think really well-meaning people at school districts were taught to tell somebody no from their boss. And it's unfortunate because it penalizes students. The worst thing that we can do for a child in education is wait. And so we don't do that in general education. I don't know why we do that in special education. So if you don't agree with the evaluations, you have the right to ask for an IEE, an independent education evaluation, which you'll get a list of vendors from your school district. If they deny your IEE, Then they have the lovely obligation of taking you to due process. What happens most with our clients is they just told you no and nothing happened. So if you're going to tell me no, that Stephanie's child can't have an outside evaluation, I will be emailing the school going, I'm looking for my docket number because I know you're taking me to due process. And often just that email, oh, well, they didn't want to do that, will prompt the outside evaluation. Okay. Other components of the document that I might file on. So they're really important statutes. I'm not going to tell you all of them. An important statute that you should know is 300.156. 300.156, and that talks about special educators and their qualifications. As you know, we are short on teachers. We have been short on special education teachers for 49 and a half years. That is not new to parents of a child with disabilities. But it's the first set of teachers we cut. And so your child, if they have special education service minutes, are to be delivered by a special educator, an instructional or related service provider. Additionally, could a level 1 aide or a teacher's assistant or a paraprofessional assist the team? Absolutely, only after the direct teaching oversight and supervision of a special educator. So I'm exhausted every day at listening to, okay, we got Rhonda in there. She's the general ed math teacher. And Rachel is one of our favorite paras. Be very careful when you're in a meeting, when people add words. I love to add words. I am a word embellisher. But if you don't know what they're talking about, it sounds like it's a special educator. So when you hear stuff like special education staff, special education team, special education committee, so these are, you've got to ask very clear questions, right? As my friend Rory Vaden says, diluted questions lead to diluted outcomes. So when I'm in a meeting, I'm a lot of things, but I'm clear. And I say, is Travis Moses a special educator in Montana? That's it. This is not personal. This is business. It's the business of educating a child with a disability that receives state and federal funds. You know, we are really lucky to have Travis. That is, yes, ma'am. So my question was, is Travis Moses a special educator? And these are really easy questions to answer. They're either yes or no. And here's what I want you to remember. When we had the pandemic of March of 2020, all of us advocates and educators and attorneys and superintendents were waiting for Betsy DeVos to give us some pass. And I would have even understood it then, that you didn't have to deliver special education and related services. We never got a pass. There's never in the history of special education, which started December 2nd, 1975, there has never been an exception or exemption to deliver special education. Didn't matter if you were in a hurricane, a snowstorm. You didn't have when we were in Houston, we had a little rainstorm a few years ago called Harvey. And we didn't have school for 22 days. The state was all over us about being out of compliance. There's never been an exception. So when you're in a meeting and somebody says, Cindy, I don't know if you know this, but we are a district of innovation. Okay, are you a district in America? Because if you're in America and you don't have a fence around your state, then IDA is the standard. So we don't have to do that because, you know, Rachel's in a program or Indiana said we could do this. Okay, if you could screen share that. And I think all of you listen to stuff in the meeting and you just believe it as it is the truth. And I ask all day long in IEP meetings, as do my partners, could you screen share that? Oh, well, I mean, it's not really a rule. Oh, okay. So it's either a statute, a regulation, or an obligation, or it's not. And so be very clear when you're in meetings that you get the answers that are appropriate so you can serve your child appropriately. Okay. So that's 300.156. There's a letter that goes with that, October 4th, 2022, from OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs. And it was a scathing letter to states, hey, you guys need to stop not having special educators delivering special education. And because they had heard from so many advocacy groups and parents. So it is an obligation. It's never changed. Next statute you want to know about is 300.323. 300.323. And that statute is, did I implement the IEP with fidelity? Did I implement the IEP as it was codified? Codified means a legal finality of something. A lot of times I will have, Rhonda and Elena, we started the IEP in, April of 2024. We were all at the meeting and we're doing it. And then August of 2024 comes along and that Rachel and Stephanie, they don't like kids. And they're like, we're not doing this, right? You don't get, the IEP is not a buffet. It's not a suggestion. It's an obligation. It's a duty and responsibility that we implement it with fidelity. And you either implement the IEP or you denied them the IEP. There's no middle. There's no middle. So 300.323, I put in all of my state filings that the IEP was not implemented with fidelity. Okay. The next one I want you to know about is 300.324. 300.324. That's really important that all of us know. It is the criteria under the federal code to develop, revise, and review an IEP meeting. And we're always doing that, right? And one of those components of those four little components says that we add parent concerns for enhancing the education of your child. And so how many of you have ever been in an IEP meeting and I said, so Elena, I just want you to know that Stephanie feels this way about their child. And Elena says, we will note your concerns. I don't know of anything more offensive than that, than maybe patting me on the head. That is not acceptable. The statute says that we are charged with, when we're developing the IEP, which means it would at least have to sit in the PLAF, right? The parent concerns for enhancing the education of the child. And let me remind us all, the parent is the number one stakeholder under the federal code. It's not a typo. It wasn't an alphabetical order. The parent will always be, whether any of us like it or not, the expert on the disabled child. So let's be very mindful that amazing school-based members do not call themselves the professionals and then the parent. That's really not good. We are all equal team members as we negotiate and navigate a successful IEP. So 300.324 talks about many pieces. It is often what we file on. Have you ever gotten a progress report and the student didn't make progress? They just didn't make any progress. They didn't make progress. I was in an IEP meeting today. I will not tell you where, but it starts with, ISD. And I said, so I'm concerned about her reading fluency. And I said, are you? And she said, no. I said, well, I am, because she's in second grade and she reads 40 words correct per minute, 90 years of oral reading fluency. You should all get a copy of that. The average second grader reads 89 words correct per minute. That's not a gap. That's a canyon. And then she went into this whole State of the Union about the all being idol that is dyslexia. Oh my gosh. So I said, dyslexia has its boundaries, right? And I said, so for May, September, October, December, and January and March, she didn't meet her IEP objectives. Well, I could see how you would see it that way. No, special education data is black and white. And so we'll be filing that they did not reconvene a meeting. And so what does that mean? The district sends out IEP progress reports, right? Commensurate with the time that other grades come out for kids, right? So you need to be looking at that. So the student was at 27 words correct per minute in September. Her annual goal was 60. She wasn't going to make it. She wasn't going to make it at all. And so when you know you're not going to make that annual goal, the district has an obligation and an expectation to reach out to mom and dad and call an IEP meeting to adjust the goal, to change the goal, because the district is charged with writing an IEP to enable the student to make progress appropriate in light of their circumstances. And when they're not making progress, then we need to change the IEP goal. And so otherwise, on the other hand, you'll have a goal that was mastered. It was mastered at the second grading period. Well, then that means there was no specially designed instruction. And so I would file that there was a violation of 300.324, that we didn't review, revise, and make a revision to the IEP. Okay. The other thing that is sort of paramount everywhere is that we are having paraprofessionals who I love. Paraprofessionals are the most amazing people in the world. We should have paraprofessional appreciation week, right? And advocate appreciation. They should be together. It could be like a bundle. But paras are the lifeblood of schools, period. Unfortunately, we don't let them come to IEP meetings, and they are great with our kids, but they have limitations. And it's important that when you're in the IEP meeting, that when you get to the schedule of services page, you've got to ask the questions. I know that you like people, you want the school to like you want the parents to like you. This is not about liking or not liking. We have one chance to teach this child strategies to self-manage their disability. And I would hate that you were so worried that Stephanie might not like you that you didn't say, is there a special educator in her reading class? And I think that you would be stunned when you ask the question. And the question is, here's what the question is not. Do not say, who is the second teacher? Don't say that. You say, who is the second adult in the class? And they'll say, Cindy Smith. And then you say, is Cindy Smith a certified special educator in New Hampshire? And it's either yes or it's not. Okay. Often when I'm in meetings, they don't even know the full name of the second person in the class. It's Mrs. C. Is that like from Happy Days? I don't, is that like CEEE? And they don't even know, right? We need to know who's educating our children. And as advocates, we are not looking for perfection. We never are. We're looking for progress, but there is an obligation to implement the IEP with fidelity. And so those are sorts of the main statutes that I would file on. There's other favorite statutes that I have, 300.115, which talks about, the resource room, which we got rid of in America, just like it was a magic trick. So we didn't get rid of the federal code. We have resource rooms in every elementary school, intermediate, junior high, and high school in America. So don't let somebody tell you that they got rid of it. You can't get rid of the federal code. So sometimes I will say, we were denied a continuum of services. Mr. Smith would not provide resource for the student who is 3 years behind academically and needs a smaller setting to work on those more isolated components of that content area. And that's kind of a big overview, but I want you to know that when you file, it says, and I'll have Stephanie share it. It says, what are you filing on? Most parents file this long letter, right? So even when my partners file, they file a letter. I send it to them. I get out. It's the first thing you get out. You get out your scissors and just the facts. A state investigator, a federal investigator, a hearing officer doesn't want to hear the story about the story. They want to hear the facts. They will only make a decision based on the facts. When they email the school, they're asking for paperwork, documentation, logs that support or refute my allegation that I filed. They don't say, how do you feel about Karen? Although they have feelings, don't we all? The question before the court, the question before the hearing officer, the question before the federal investigator, the state investigator, was there a violation and was the student harmed? Was there a violation and was the student harmed? And what is the obligation to rectify it? So Stephanie, if you can, and if you guys have questions, if you'll drop them in the chat, they're going directly to us, but we're going to answer all of them. That would be the most efficient way because we have a gazillion 500 million people on tonight. And so we want to be really good with our time and answering your questions. So this is, if you go to your state's website, every state has a form. Usually they're, you can fill them out, you can download them and populate it. You can print it off and fill it out yourself. So this is the special education complaint form in Texas. It's very important that you're not just filing a state complaint form because that's not a special education form. So make sure that when you're talking about an IEP, this is special education complaint form. And so can you make that a little bigger for the old people that's talking right now? Yes, these kids today. Can you make it a little bit bigger? Like my hair? There we go. So if you scroll up a little bit, so this is a really good template. And, if you believe that your child, can we just scroll back up to the top a little bit, Stephanie? If you believe that a public education agency, so a public education agency is a school that takes state and federal funds. Those are preschool programs like ECSE, Early Childhood Special Education. Those are charter schools. They are not private schools. They are not schools of faith. They are not homeschool co-ops. They are not your private, Kumon or Brain Builders, any of those things. But a public education agency that's overseen by your state's entity. So the Texas Education Agency is considered a public education agency. In most states, it's called an SEA, the State Education Agency. The LEA is the local education agency. That's where your child goes to school, the district. A nonprofit charter school that's not otherwise included, and any other political subdivision of the state that's responsible for providing education to students with disabilities. The state's designed this model form for you. You can find additional information. You may choose to use this form. However, you can fill out your own form if you want, and you certainly can do that. But this is certainly a great template for you to follow. People ask me, do I need to get an attorney? You don't. You can if you want to, but these are pretty standard filings. You certainly could use an attorney. That would be quite the investment, but that's certainly your choice. So first, we're going to be looking at the student's information. So I, as an advocate, file on behalf of my clients. I do not have my clients file. You know why? Because they don't work in the special education space. They don't know statutes. I wouldn't expect them to know statutes. They don't understand what states are looking for. You certainly can fill this out yourself, but certainly have somebody else look at it and see if it's really wordy and emotional or if it's just the facts. So in the space below, we're going to talk about the student, the name, their date of birth, where school district they attend, and what campus they attend. Okay, if you want to scroll up, Stephanie. So complainant's information. So I am the complainant. So in here, I'm going to put my name, relationship to the student. I just put in advocate for the student, my address, my city, my phone number. And I put all that information in there. You cannot file a complaint anonymously. It's not a thing. This is not, this is not a hotline. You have to file and give your information. You can file on behalf of anybody. So let's say that I know somebody in Tabitha's class is not getting their IEP. Well, I could file on that. I would still need permission from their parent because they are minors. So you don't have to be an advocate to file on behalf of somebody else. Okay, the next section. So the complaint information. So your complaint must allege a violation of IDEA. So that is this book that we talked about. It doesn't say a violation of how you were treated. Travis didn't let you sit in the good chair. Elena made you wait in the lobby too long. A violation of IDEA. So you want to make sure that this is in the federal code. Again, this is 34 CFR, volume 2 of 4. We have it on any of our sites. You can get it on Amazon as well. So it says the alleged violation must have occurred not more than 1 calendar year. So in most state complaints, they go back a year. For a federal complaint for the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, it's 180 days. So 6 months. So OCR is 6 months. State complaint is 1 year. A due process in all but I think about 5 states now goes back 2 years. So 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. Okay. So again, if you want to complain, don't wait. Don't wait for the school to turn around because you might be outside of your timeline to file. So describe in detail each act that you allege violates IDEA, the Texas Education Code, or the Texas Administration Code. So when I file, obviously I live here. Although I have clients everywhere, I happen to know the statutes in Texas that I'm filing on as well, but I always lead with the federal statute. While the boxes below are fillable, this is available, blah, blah, blah. So scroll up just a little bit. What violations are you alleging occurred? Describe the nature of the allegation in as much detail as possible. And so I will say, Billy Smith was denied a special educator for 100 minutes a week in science. He was denied a special educator for 100 minutes a week in social studies. he was denied his dyslexia services for 120 minutes a week. And then I'm going to put the statute that goes with that. So for sure, the statute is going to be 300.323 because that was the IEP and we didn't implement it, right? What you don't want to do here is explain why you think it didn't happen. So Billy Smith didn't get it because, you know, Stephanie's on maternity leave and Rhonda's a really nice lady. Now she works there. And then Cora's trying really hard to hire somebody. This ain't that. What is the violation that occurred in the statute? Don't give a story about the story. Okay. The next section is different than the first section. And even I mess this up sometimes. So B is what facts support the allegations. So the facts are, I was in a recorded IEP meeting in Texas, February 12th, and Rhonda Austin, the principal, said, we only have paraprofessionals in science and social studies. So that is a fact that supports my allegation. Or Rhonda said the second person in the class is a para and his name is Joe Smith. And Joe Smith is not a certified paraprofessional or level 1, 2, 3, or aid in the state of Texas, right? So just the facts. What significant dates and events are relative to support the allegation? So what was the date of the meeting? What was the date of the phone call? What was the date of the Zoom? What was the date of the MDR? What was the date of whatever those dates are? Don't just go, you know, Stephanie's been terrible to us all year. That is not a thing. You have got to be as specific as possible. Okay. In the next section in C, what documents should be reviewed by the state education agency? Well, now there's already a list that they're going to review, and Stephanie's going to share that one page in just a little bit because she's young and fast and knows stuff. They're not asking for you to send in documents, and don't do that. Don't send a 5-ring binder about every crime that's occurred to you and 50 pages of visual that Mikey did. They don't want that. They're going to be asking for documents from the LEA, the local education agency. But I'm going to say our recorded January 3rd, 2025, our recorded facilitated meeting, February 9th, 2025, our recorded phone call. And you should know in almost every state, it's a one disclosure state. And you should know that I'm training my parents and my advocates and everybody to assume that if you are speaking, that somebody is recording you, right? So if I get a call from the school, because often schools train their staff to just call parents so it's not recorded, it's probable that you're being recorded. If you send a text message, that's considered a document. If you send a dojo, that's a document. If you leave a voicemail after you've been to happy hour, that's something that people can listen to. And I know that we become very friendly, but when a parent files, they're going to have to prove their allegations so that in a manner that there's enough evidence there that the state would open it. If I just said, I feel like it happens, they're not going to open the investigation. Okay. So everything, you need to be professional when you're working with parents and students, and parents need to be everybody needs to be professional, but the information that supports the allegation is what the state is looking for. Okay. D, please describe your proposal for resolving allegations. And so I've trained on this for years. I'm always asking for two things. The first thing that I'm asking for is for the district to be trained. I love teachers. 20% of my clients are teachers. They're not trained. They spend their own money, invest in trainings. The districts aren't training them on special education law, the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, the application of the law, documentation, measuring, monitoring, writing IEP goals. They're just not. And I don't know that they're ever going to be. So the first thing that I ask for, because I want it to impact as many kids as possible and educators, is that the district is trained on their duties and obligations under the Texas Administration Code and IDEA and implementation of an IEP with fidelity, and a state monitoring program for a corrective action plan and a state monitoring plan for a year. That's what I asked for. Number 2, I'm going to ask for relief for the student. So in case law, which is when cases go to hearing, right? It's called case law, which is where we litigate and argue about what the intention of the law means. And then we have decisions from hearing officers. And so we would ask for relief for the student that would resolve it. And we might ask for 30 hours of executive functioning training. We might ask for outside tutoring by a certified special educator. We might ask for additional minutes to double their minutes that they're receiving now for related or instructional service. Again, you don't want to go crazy on this part. And what I mean by that is that we have kids that were denied. I have a kiddo, we just had a meeting. He was denied 2,200 minutes. Well, he's 7. I'm not like, he's going to go to school all summer, right? We don't want children with disabilities to have to pay for the crime that adults didn't do their job. So we're looking for something to, one, reestablish trust with the family and the district, and to remediate what was lost. So I don't ever do minute for minute unless it's something really light, maybe that's doable. And I certainly don't want children with disabilities to be stuck in summer school. Okay. What I don't accept as resolution is this offer that's often lobbed over the fence. Well, how about he goes to ESY? That's not what ESY was for. And all kids, especially kids with disabilities, they need their summers off, right? And so ESY is for something totally, is for, kiddos that need to have maintenance on their goals because they've had regression or were concerned for loss of critical skills. If you want to accept ESY, know that it may not be exactly what you want. If I'm going to ask for a resolution, I want it to be specifically for my child that I'm filing on. Okay. And then if you scroll up, the complaint and signature, so that would be my signature, notification of the agency. So I don't just email this to the state and go, oh, okay, ABC school district going to get it. I have to email it to the superintendent. And I don't know if you've tried to find email addresses for people that work in schools now. They're all hidden. So usually you can just put superintendent at, Yahoo ISD, and that will get to them. So I will completely fill these out, check them several times, because once you file it, you can't go, oh, I just remembered something, right? You get to file it once. And then if you scroll up a little bit more, Stephanie, at the bottom, it gives you another kind of checklist again before you send it in. Make sure that you've done all of these things. So it's really helpful. And then the other thing for a state written complaint is it's a 60-day turnaround, 60 calendar days. So it's a very quick turnaround in the world of mediation and due process and all of those things. And so it's often a very useful mechanism for something that you need to have addressed right now, right? And so that's sort of a general one. And then when you file this complaint, the state will say they've opened the complaint. It will come back to you, the complainant, and the superintendent. And then there'll be a list of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 things that the state asks from the district. And so, Stephanie, is there a way that you can just screen share that one page? I just want to give them sort of a framework of, if you're a school-based member, what the state education agency might be asking from you. Because often that we don't have to take data. Oh, you do, love. That's what we do in schools, right? We teach and we measure. And so when there's a complaint, the state is going to be asking for a very long list of items, and the school has 2 weeks to produce them. So, and if you don't,
I can do that for you, Karen. I have the FERPA form up while I'm looking for that document.
Okay, that's fine. And so I have one in front of me, and I'll just read some to you real quickly. So this was a request for. This was a filing that I did in one of my favorite school districts in 2023. And the document request from the state education agency to the LEA was 18 things. Prior written notice from the state about this matter, all records of relevant communication, a list of the staff members who are knowledgeable about the complainant, including each person's position at the meeting, and the web address, LEA's academic year, a narrative from the campus principal with documentation reflecting what steps the principal took to address these problems before we got to this place. a copy of the student's IEP progress reports, academic report cards, a copy of students' daily attendance records, provide a copy of IEPs and effective for the year, including a copy of all parent notices and all teachers in them, a copy of the audio recordings for October, blah, 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 blah. Provide a list of all staff members who delivered special education services to the student between this date and that date. For each member, list their certification from the state of Texas. And this is a different one that she's showing here, but it's a very complex list that the state asks for. They don't ask if you want to have it, if you think it have it. Provide documentation showing the dates and times a student was provided with 200 minutes per week of special education and math, 100 minutes a week in a recess, 225 minutes of special education service and specials. So with supporting documentation to the allegation that the paraprofessional tasked with providing the student special education was not working under the supervision of a special educator. So the states, when given an opportunity, that's good, Stephanie, thank you, dear. When given an opportunity, will address your concerns, right? And sometimes we have situations that are systemic. And then in that way, I will ask under the relief. My third thing I will ask for is a state audit. And so it's really important that if you have something that rises to the level that you want somebody outside the district to rule on, to make a decision, to bring about an opportunity from change, this is an amazing way to do that. So this document is a FERPA release. So if I'm the complainant, if I'm not the parent of the child, then, you know, Rhonda Austin has to sign this, fill it out, give me consent to be the complainant, and she has to notarize it. Now, in some other states, you don't have to notarize it, but certainly you need that when you send in the complaint. So if I send in the complaint and did not have this from Rhonda, they'll open it, but they won't communicate with me, right? So in the middle, if they're saying, you know, Karen, we need, can you give us, the school doesn't have a copy of the audio from October 24th. You're kidding, it evaporated. Then I'm going to provide that. So the consent is so that I can be part of the investigation all the way through the final decision. So that was a lot of information, and I talk a lot. So I just want you to know that these are your legal protections, rights, and safeguards. You don't have legal rights unless you know, invoke them. And I think that you'd be really surprised what change could come about when we learn to file effective state complaints. So Elena, if you're ready, I'm going to let you read the questions in order with feeling.
Absolutely. Here we go. We only have a few at the moment. So one of our lovely...
Hang on just a second. So, and if you guys, so if you want to put a question in the chat, just put my question is and put it in there and we will get to them.
My question is, what about testing for kids who have chronic absences?
Okay. Are you at the very top at 7:07 p.m.?
I only start at 8:32 p.m.
Okay.
Hold on.
So, do you see, oh, they wrote it to me. Okay. I'll just read them. They sent it to me. Sorry. It's okay. So Wendy, Aaron's mama. My question is, I want a state complaint in Virginia and then appeal for my son for the denial of a full year of access to education. The IEP team never would even discuss corrective actions. And then they filed in the circuit court to try to overturn the state complaint. That is still ongoing, and neither the LEA nor the SCA seem to understand the obligation that they must provide special education. So he's been without education for 2.5 years. There are a lot of news articles. I'm so sorry about that. And that's, yeah, so that's a due process. So you want a due process, or you want to, it sounds like you want a due process, because there's no, you can't appeal a decision to, I think that's a due process, but I'm so sorry that that's going on, but keep fighting for your kiddo. Next is another question from Wendy. It says, Aaron was undereducated, negative educational benefit at a PDS during, he was simply supposed to repeat 8th grade at local home school. So he'll be 18 this November and has yet to have an 8th grade education. I'm so sorry. All right. Sarissa Brown asked, what about testing for kids who have chronic absences? Is there a fine line between having an SLD or delay because of attendance? My child had a chronic illness and the school has been wrestling with, is she delayed because of disability or attendance? So we certainly have to make our child available for them to provide an education, and being absent does affect that, right? But I'll be in meetings and I'll be like, oh, Katrina missed 2 days last fall. That's not the reason she can't read. Sorry, nice try. But there are kids, obviously, if they're not well, then, their health is priority. So it is a fine line to walk both of those. My question is, what should someone do if a state complaint finds on the side of the school? Can you refile the same violation? Well, if the state complaint file, what they find is that your allegation is not substantiated, right? And so there's no ruling on that. So they don't rule on allegation number 1. I mean, I wouldn't file on the same violation. You might file better. I filed the other day and I act like I'd never heard any of my training. I was just like, and he immediately was like, you didn't fill out this part. And so if it's dismissed because there's not enough components to open the investigation, or you didn't give enough information, you can certainly refile on that with more robust information. Lisa says, my kid has not had special education instructor promoted this year. They told me in the state of Missouri, they can have substitutes if the sub is pursuing a SPED degree and supervised by a SPED teacher who's been out of work for medical issues. I checked with a lawyer, and apparently that is true for this state. So it's very important that you're understanding what they're saying. They told me in the state of Missouri they can have substitutes. So it's word salad, right? No state in America can reduce the benefit of IDEA. So that's why it's very important that when you file the state complaint that you file the federal statute. There is no state that has a pass on special education. So when I file, I would make sure that you do that. Also, there's a lovely young man in compliance in Missouri, and I would just email compliance and said, Buttercup said, this is true. Can you show me the statute that says that? Right? So maybe I'm in Alabama. I don't have a lot of clients in Alabama. Somebody said something at meeting. It sounded valid. It usually sounds valid when they're not telling the truth and then they're good at it. And so I'll call the Department of Education and I'll get someone on the phone. And I'll say, they said in Alabama during football season that you don't have to implement the IEP, right? And then I will have a response back from compliance going, I don't know who told you that. That's not true. And then I can go back to the meeting and say, hey, Rachel from compliance in Alabama said, your pants are on fire. I don't say that. I'm much nicer than that. That's not true. And then they'll go, okay. So, every state is different, but they don't get to reduce the intention and obligation of IDEA. Yes. So this recording will be put up on our YouTube channel, Special Education Academy. Let's see. My question is, there's a special education teacher and a long-term substitute. They do not work in the same classroom or in the same hallway. The special education teacher, and the IEP writes the lesson plans, but does not work with my child. The long-term tubs with my child. Does that count as a licensed special education teacher? So the human that works with your child is either a special educator in that state or they are not. So it's a yes or no. So supervising from down the hall is not delivering special education. Megan says, my question is, can I file a state complaint and a federal complaint at the same time? Very good question, Megan. Don't do that. Megan, sorry. Don't do that, because it will say in the form, have you filed this anywhere else? So if you file with the federal government and you tell them that you filed with the state of Arkansas, they're not going to open it. So the entities are not going to compete with each other. Now, if you're really good at doing this, there are times that I would file a state complaint, maybe on evaluation and placement, and then I file a federal complaint on a student's voice output communication device, which is a training for another day, because I know that OCR does not put up with that shenanigans. But you really need to know what you're doing if you're doing that. If you think you will end up in due process, should you wait to file a state complaint? I would, because you're showing your hand, right? My state investigation is almost over, and the teacher hit and assaulted my child, and the principal didn't do anything. The teacher removed my son and placed him in an office alone for 2 hours. I'm so sorry. Next question: when a complaint is done and the state reviewer put their opinions and their findings and ignore all laws that was cited, can you refile the state complaint since it wasn't done without bias? The state investigator is the state investigator. So if they're an employee of the state, their opinion is valid for the entity that hired them. Now, if you get a state complaint and they said, you know, Dallas Independent School District owes Billy Smith 20 hours in reading, and the LEA doesn't do that corrective action plan, you can refile with that same complaint number. Amy says, what if they do not put the documentation in the PWN, even though you specifically asked for them to document? What if they refuse to add an amendment to the PWN, but say they will file email requests in students' file? Is this good enough to serve as documentation? So prior written notice is an obligation at the end of every IEP meeting, no matter what happened. We're in love, we're not in love, we did it, we didn't do it, we're going to do it. So the PWN has 7 legal areas that must be completed by the LEA. It's not an option. So that would definitely be a procedural violation that the state did not meet their obligations under the state education agency as it relates to documenting their actions and providing the parents 5 days prior written notice. Erica, should we list every date they've missed dyslexia service in that section? I may not list every date, Erica, but I would say he's missed 1,750 minutes. Heather, are these points valid and would they be enough to file for a state complaint? SSD Director of Compliance states the progress reports were not given to me. Missing, embedded in the present level. I love a good embedded. I always say, is that like a tick? Principal states we don't have to have data because I don't require my gen ed teacher to record for any child with a disability in IEP. At meeting in October, my child's IEP 3 goals were not met. A month later in November, all 3 goals were claimed to be met. And therefore, we're reducing pull-out IEP services from 90 minutes to 40 minutes for an IEP meeting, no data given, but opinions. IEP team says this is enough. Then the SSD and school district's lack of communication and directive from principal not to speak with any staff member except for him. I mean, I could file that, but you've got to really be able to substantiate it in writing. So, I mean, that's something I would get an advocate to help you with. But those are certainly components that we could file on a state complaint. Certainly the school districts told us not to speak with anybody. That's retaliation. Angela says, what if you didn't know until a FERPA that many violations occurred on how they switched from an IEP to a 504? When you showed the school, they said, let's look at the future, not the past. Oh, that sounds like the Academy Award statement. I'm going to look at the future as soon as you mop up the past. So you're going to have to rectify what was denied the student. You denied him a FAPE and he was harmed. So we will be looking at the past, the present, and the future. So question: a parent never waived her right to attend an IEP meeting. District had the meeting, removed parent, her anonymous advocate, and her circle of parents. School is denying the fact. Is school violating parental meaningful participation? So attending a meeting and meaningful participation are 2 different violations under your procedural safeguards. And in Special Education Academy, we have a training that I did on all your procedural safeguards. So the district, the parent had to be invited to the meeting. So if we invited Shannon 4 times to the meeting and she didn't come, then they've met their obligation. So their obligation is only 3 invitations to a meeting. We are charged with, meeting together at a mutually agreed upon time. So if you can quantify that in open records, that would be helpful. Can an advocate come to an IEP meeting as a parent professional? Parent professional did not want to state his name. If you're in the meeting, you got to say, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham. You don't just go, you have to identify yourself. Whatever, I might be going well, no, I'm always an advocate. You know, I had a, I was going to say, like I could be somebody else. I mean, I'm there as their advocate, and there's anybody can be the parent's advocate, whether you're a volunteer or paid. That I'm coming to support the parent. The parent can invite the guy that changes their oil, right? They're allowed to bring anybody that they want, but everybody has to identify themselves in the meeting. Music was removed during the school year. School said music was not on IP. I thought music is open to all. Music is a special or content area. It's a state requirement that the student has specials or electives, so we wouldn't remove that. The case is highly contentious. What are your thoughts on parents who force parents on a communication plan? Well, I'm not a fan of forcing anything. It's about what's appropriate for the student to make gains. And I have a question regarding schedule of services. Can a general ed algebra teacher provide math support pullouts during any other time other than math? Nope. Yeah, no, it's going to be a no. Yes, no, we do not provide math pullout after school. No. Silly kids. All right, Stephanie. All right, my question is, I filed a complaint in Mo. I assume that's a state that starts with M. I'm not even going to pretend that I know. Is Travis, do you know what the MO is? Is that
Missouri? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to see if Travis knew. Mo Betta. The state decided the school was in compliance because they considered relative factors. When I asked for clarification because their own evaluation results qualified the child, the state said they don't judge the school's final decision. They just, the process. What can I do from here? I mean, if you believe that there's a new violation, you can file on a new violation. And you might have a situation where using a different agency, like a federal agency, will get more gains. Is there a statute for a child being actually physically harmed in the classroom by their para? That's a criminal thing. So when somebody physically hurts a child, I am ethically charged as a mediator, as an advocate, as a human. If anybody told me a child was harmed in a school, I would tell the parents, you have 24 hours to call Child Protective Services, or I will be doing that. But that's not part of IDEA. So no, that wouldn't be a state complaint. Ask Cindy about the furniture blocking her child in a building. Is there a statute for same thing? Yeah, those are criminal. Those are investigations by CPS. Patty, my question is it worth filing a complaint if we're moving out of the state when the school year ends? No, Patty, but don't get them any end of the year gifts. I'm just kidding. No, I would just take what you've learned and move on. My question is, the SCA denied 2 due processes filed over the summer. What? Oh, yeah. Welcome to Virginia. It's beautiful there, but my Lord, I was in a meeting one time in Virginia and I said, are you the diagnostician? He goes, I am a person in the meeting. I said, you don't know if you're a diagnostician? I said, I'm a person in the meeting. I said, well, if I was a diagnostician, I mean, I would know if I was. They are special in Virginia. I think it's the snow. I have a question regarding accommodations. A teacher listed in the grade book but never provided a single one. If I file a state complaint saying they didn't implement the IEP, is there something that I can prove? Or teacher listing accommodations in the grade book taken as proof? If I had a violations for accommodations, I'm going to file federally with the Office of Civil Rights, because that accommodations are a civil right. And we'll do a training. I'm going to lie and say next month, because I'm not doing anything. Because I don't know if you know about this time of the year. We call it March Madness, April Fools, and Mayhem. So this time of the year, we're all like, I feel like I could work at Cracker Barrel, right? So if it was accommodations, I'm going to file OCR all day long. Question is, can I file a state complaint if my student's teacher was not SPED certified? The school district stated the IEP coordinator was responsible. So you can file that your student's IEP wasn't implemented, 300.324, and that 300.156, they were not a certified special educator. The state complaint completely ignored case law, showed bias, and didn't even address the 19 issues. There's no option for appeal. We've reached out for help with the state, and they've basically ignored us. Yeah, I mean, the tiered system for addressing special education needs is not great, but it certainly is limited as well. How do you calculate the hours of special education your student has missed or were due for the complaint? So I just literally calculate them. If Eileen was not a special education teacher, then I go from August 8th when we started school till March 19th, and I literally calculate those hours that were missed for my complaint. And then, of course, I'm amenable to something else, a reduction to resolve it. Our paraprofessionals working with special education students are required to have level 1, 2, 3, or educational aid certificate in Texas. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Can you elaborate on paras going into general ed room with my son? The general ed student is not an ESE teacher. I'm told they don't need to be because they have para accommodation. Oh, are you in Florida? Yeah, so it sounds good. General ed teacher and a para. Let me help you out. You're looking for SDI. Here's how you know it's SDI. It's special and there's instruction. The only people that can provide special design instruction are related or instructional service providers or special education teachers. That's it. So general ed teacher, love her, but she's general edding. Para is supporting. We're missing the person that's going to design the instruction. So the question that I ask in the meetings is who provided the specially designed instruction? And the lovely general ed teacher said to me today, she goes, oh, right before she goes to dyslexia, I do a running record. It didn't sound like specially designed instruction. Yeah. But she was very nice and she had really good handwriting. How many violations can I list in a state complaint? 4,692. I'm going to list them all. I'm going to say Bob had a bad outfit. I didn't like Stephanie's Yeti cup. No, we just list we can list the violation. I can list a violation of parental participation. And then I talk about how many times it occurred, right? We're building the acuity. Can you file a state complaint if you have documented a retaliation against your child by a teacher? That's a federal complaint. Retaliation is with the Office of Civil Rights. What if you filed a state complaint and were awarded a specific number of hours as compensatory education as a result of denial of shape? I've struggled with that, a denial of shape. But then the school never provides the compensatory education. What would your next steps be? Dear State Education Agency, the Yahoos in North Texas didn't give me my hours. And that they will call them and go, line 1, ding dong. Kelly, I found the school diagnosed our daughter with dyscalculia and put in her medical history on her registration. No one has talked to me about this. No interventions implemented to my knowledge. She's been denied testing in prior years. Ugh. Yeah, open records makes us crazy. What details and documentation should I include in the state complaint to address the school's retaliation? Retaliation is federal. The state is not going to look at retaliation. Denial of access to records, that's a FERPA complaint. That's something totally different. Refusal to implement if it's denial of access to records, that's 300.613, 300.613. Refusal to implement the district recommended 504. That's a 504 complaint. So if it's a 504, then you've got to go OCR. Gifted evaluation to teachers not to speak to me. That's retaliation. Calling the police. You're going to be hard pressed to prove that. How can I effectively present evidence to strengthen the complaint for favorable outcome? I mean, I would definitely do it. Those are all federal complaints there. So we have 2 digital products on Special Education Academy, how to file a state complaint that you can invest in, and a 5.5 hour training on how to do a federal complaint that you can invest in. Not SHAPE. I know that was funny there. SHAPE, FAPE, same thing, right? My question is, what can I file if the school sends my child's schoolwork as evidence of her progress, but it's not hers? Keep it. I would make a photocopy. My child's name is not Bert. It's Heather. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when they send the work, I'm like, oh, it would have been better if you didn't. I had a little boy the other day in life skills, and this guy sent, it was like this big of a clock, an analog clock. I said, well, your handwriting is fantastic. He can't write his name. So I'm glad that you filled out the clock sheet for 30 weeks, but he should have just kept it. I think he filled it out during the Super Bowl. Anyway, yeah. So if it's not their work, then they don't have any data to support the outcome. If it is he said, she said, service minutes are not met. Have you ever seen a case where the service provider falsified service logs? Yeah, but I've never found a case where they're good at it. They're terrible liars, right? They're just, Or I was in a meeting the other day. I said, do you have data collection sheets? And she said, yes, I do. That's never a good start with me. So I said, go ahead, Buttercup. She's like, I will screen share it, which I can't do because I'm old. And it was a Google Doc. I didn't know what that was. And she's like, and then she opened it up. I was like, okay, September 9th, September 12th, November 4th, and December 5th. Correct. So you took data for 4 out of 18 weeks. Well, that's just what it looks like. No, that like I'm good. And then, yeah. So before you throw down that gauntlet with me, as people will say, I have a reputation. I'm not going to negotiate with you on data. You either have it or you don't. Intros at the IEP meeting today. Today I identify as a cat, Miss Meow. Oh, I don't know if that would work with me. Sometimes I identify as a swimwear model, but they get mad about that. Oh, Tiffany, my question is, can my school in South Carolina, oh, we love South Carolina. Can my district hold an IEP without me being there if I decline to offer due to work schedule? No, you have to find a time that works for both parties. And so I am working with the school in South Carolina. They are in no rush to do anything. They are just yeah. And then we have the great Dr. Mitchell Yell, who will be with us in April, who is a hearing officer in South Carolina. Is going to train us on documentation, specially designed instruction. Angie, question is the AP gave me a copy of my IEP with missing pages. AU supplement PCS. I received progress report 2 weeks later after grade period ended. The principal walked out of my ARD meeting and stepped out for about 10 minutes. Is that okay? It's bad manners. Bad manners is currently not illegal. Ask any of my husbands. So it's just, maybe they don't have the mantle to do the job that they were hired for. Do you provide assistance to the state of Louisiana? Yes, my favorite grandchild is there. Louisiana, they let the good times roll, don't they? We did a press conference there, and we kept Tanya's son out of the pond. My son is 15. He was denied FAPE in one of the school districts, switched to a new district. Don't you mean a parish? She went to a parish. Who said several procedural violations, accommodation violations, current IEP is not reasonably calculated. Look at that. I like it, Tanya. And we have several needs to not being met. District officials are ready to meet with me, but I'm also the district's, and I want to get, if you work there, you got to get support. The people that are treated worse than our clients are clients that are school district employees. And all of my partners can agree with that. It's like, oh, I thought you could have just called us, Cindy. No, you've been lying to her for 15 years. That's why she called Karen. Oh, you're welcome, Ruby. Is there any law that says IEP must be able to be understood between different schools or staffs? There should be a law for that. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know. Where's page 1? Like I was just in a meeting today in Wyoming, which is beautiful. And I will be training there this summer. If you'd like to come out to the Wild West and join me. And I was like, is the IEP 7 pages long? She goes, it's a starting place. Oh, my eyebrow color order is longer than 7. I'm like, oh. She goes, well, we just didn't want to predetermine anything. Yeah. It should be understood by all that pick it up. It's called the stranger test. Yes, Amber's in Florida. See how I knew that, Amber? I got 1,000 million clients in Florida, and I am willing to mess up my hairdo and do a press conference here. My question is, can I file an OCR complaint on accommodations that weren't provided and a state complaint on other substantive issues? Yes, but you really, really, really need to know what you're doing. Can a parent request service minute logs from school districts as proof that services have been provided? So the log doesn't mean jack to me. Rachel can come in and log in, and then she's on her phone playing Words with Friends, right? Or purple, people eaters. So a log doesn't mean anything. I want to know that she can prove the specially designed instruction. Can she talk about the specially designed instruction? Can she talk about when she pulled Billy once a week and worked on that IEP goal? So logs don't mean anything to me. My question is, my district has pre-planned virtual days. Oh, no. We're not doing virtual, Jack. There's no virtual in IDEA. I would decline your offer of virtual because you can't virtually implement an IEP. You certainly can't virtually implement accommodations. And we're not doing that. So you must be somewhere where it snows. We just have sweatathons here in Texas. Yeah, I would just say I'm declining the virtual days as that's not an appropriate implementation of the IEP. Kelly, my question is, I found out the school died. Oh, that we already did that. Did we do that? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to take like a few more questions. I have 327 hours with personal. They said Cindy. Yes, Cindy is amazing. She's one of my favorite advocates. And if she doesn't do a good job, you just let me know. We'll let her have it. Yeah, Cindy's amazing. All of our advocates are amazing. Oh, thank you, dear. And if I had time to take on people, I would. My question is, what if the principal will not allow teacher to communicate with the parent? That's retaliation. Yeah, let's not do that. Today's focus, communicating needs, and the total minutes on the screen for my son's VOCD for a full instructional day was 4 minutes. Uh-oh. I feel like that's a little light, even in Texas. Okay. All right. What's the best way to get change of placement to a special school? Special school. So you mean a school that has a more specific program? Is it you've got to provide the data that supports that? Vision blind. Well, our great Travis, who's going to wave. Travis, wave. He's our best looking guy advocate. Even though he's the only one, but he's still the best looking one. So Travis is a phenom and sits on the national board for the National Federation for the Blind, and is such an asset to our team. So he could probably help you if you want. We can get you in touch with him, and he might be able to do a records review and give you recommendations all the way up to representation. So just reach out to us at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com. So I'm going to open it up. I know better than to do this, but I'll open it for a couple of minutes. If anybody has a burning question that starts out, my question is about a state complaint. And everybody, Shannon's looking at me like, what are you doing, Karen? I don't know. I'm not sane in the membrane. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. We're going to do another training next month on Office of Civil Rights because it's separate. And know that we still have all the protections for our kids with disabilities, our kids that have a 504. Those are federal acts. Those were in place long before any department of anything. So that is good. Hope this counts. Yes, this counts. Candy, do you want to ask a question? You're so funny. You can just unmute yourself, dear.
Am I unmuted?
Mm-hmm.
I had sent it to Elena. I've got she's a district employee, so we don't want to go to state complaint, but they've agreed to compensatory services. How do I document that in the IEP itself?
So my question is, no, you tell me. My question is,
where do I document the compensatory services agreement?
Yeah, so this compensatory service agreement does not sit inside of the IEP. An IEP is an individualized education program for a student for a year. We can certainly have a reference to it. Certainly, I would have somebody capture it in the deliberations, but it's not part of the IEP.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would just be some document we agree on?
Yeah, so you and, the Yahoo, the amazing leader at the district says we'll give Billy 20 hours. As long as you have that in an email, a group email, that's a legal communication.
Okay.
But then I would put parameters around it. Candy, what is the closure date of it, right? So within 36 instructional weeks by June 2026, something like that.
What's the longest you've ever done compensatory services?
I can't tell you. 6 years.
Okay.
Because I'm a
He's
baller.
little, so
yeah. Now somebody else is not going to do that. I had a settlement that actually got rid of a principal, not like in a legal way, like he's probably still alive, but I was like, I don't ever want to see him again, the head shaker. Anyway, all right, Stephanie Lane.
Hi, my question is, how can I successfully advocate to get a student back on a full day? He is now on reduced hours. We have asked time and time again, and there's excuse after excuse. And that's all.
Are you the parent?
I'm the advocate.
Well, it's an
No.
obligation that we educate the student. I don't know what these reduced day things are. That's not under IDEA. We need the whole day to implement the IEP. So I don't,
Right.
is it a state special? Was he a behavior? Was he?
It was behavioral, and then we finally got the FBA. That was also mine with the state complaint, and I feel it was filed wrong. We need to file again because the student is still on reduced day.
So are they providing him homebound also?
Nope.
Okay. So I would just say we need to have a meeting to look at out of district placement at the expense of the district, as you're not able to provide him a FAPE.
Okay.
And then whoa, wait, I don't know why you're talking like that, Stephanie. So yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome, dear. Okay. Anybody else? Cora, I know you're not in a robe, but it kind of looks like a robe, doesn't it, you guys? Just like the top robe. I know. It's a very cute robe, athletic jogging robe. All right, last call. Anybody?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, my question is, my son's IEP says that he should have an AAC device.
Mhm.
It was not provided by the school. I have one at home that I provided. I need it at home and they are not providing him one. What can I do?
So I would get the copy of the Assistive Technology Act of 1998, which talks about individuals with disabilities, whether they're 3 or 53, if they need assistive technology to benefit from their setting. We have to provide them services and equipment so that we can support them in a work setting or school setting.
Okay, can I have a second question?
Yeah.
My second question is, I have a progress report that suggests that my son, my student, was using an AAC device in a progress report when his teacher said he did not have one.
Okay. So I would give the school an opportunity to fix the clerical error. And then I might find that, the documentation was fraudulent. And so if the documentation is fraudulent, the IEP was invalid.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Ms. Brown?
Hi, I have 2 questions. The first question is about the state requesting the documentation from the LEA. And then my second question is the child fine violation question.
Okay. So my first question is?
So my first question is, I filed a complaint about a PWN, and when they requested from the district a copy of the PWN, they provided the PWN that they had sent me, and it didn't cover all 7 components. And it didn't actually really address what I was even asking for the PWN, but they were found in compliance. Do I feel that? Do I have it?
So let me kind of address the problem before the PWN. So one of the things that I do with clients is I will have them, when I know it's going to be our disagree meeting, is I will say, Stephanie, I need you and your husband to write a statement, which sort of gives a history of the shenanigans, the violations, and I read it into the record, and then it becomes part of the IEP document. I don't trust a district that is not honest to write an honest PWN. So it's very important that when we are in disagreement, that we have captured that. If you're in Missouri or Florida, where we don't take notes, right? Or Georgia, where I don't know what they're doing, then it's important that you say within 24 hours, I'm going to send you our understanding of today's events at the meeting, and we want that attached to the IEP. And so that you have your parental position in there. No school is going to say, hey, yeah, we were really rude to Rhonda and we just gave it to her and we did a terrible job. Nobody's ever going to say that, right? The PWN serves the school. I don't ever see it serving the family. So when I know that we're going to get there and we're going to have to file, I'm going to make sure that document is read into the record, even if I can't record. And then we email it to the person doing the IEP right then and ask for it to be attached.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
I do have another question about a child find.
Okay.
So they did actually, I was pleasantly surprised. They did a very thorough evaluation, but they didn't address the writing. They didn't do any evaluations, any assessments on writing.
Okay.
And at the end of the year, my daughter who at the time was in 4th grade, literally could write one sentence. And so her teacher,
So my question is,
her teacher hand wrote her essay, turned it in, graded her own writing that she submitted on behalf of my daughter. And I use that for a sample as into why my daughter needs to be assessed. Can I file a state complaint as a child find violation?
so I mean, I don't think you need all that. I would just say she struggles in writing. This is my formal request for my daughter to be tested in the areas of writing, assistive technology evaluation and written expression, an OT evaluation and fine motor, and look at the condition of written expression or dyscalculia under IDEA.
So
And then
if school won't do it, do I file a state complaint then?
so if they won't test, then you would file a state complaint for a denial of child fine.
Thank you.
All right, and then last but not least, Megan. Miss O'Brien, hopefully I'm saying it right. Okay, so a couple more questions in the chat. Florida, Polk County, who do you recommend to connect with an advocate? So just email us at advocate@specialeducationacademy and we'll connect you with one of our partners. Where do we find information about your training in Wyoming? I'll be training for the state PIC August 2nd in Casper.
Hi, Karen. I just figured out how to unmute.
That's okay.
Hi. My question is, I'm in PA and we don't allow recordings in IEP meetings. How do I get can I submit my handwritten, very sloppy handwritten notes in my state complaint?
Well, I mean, your state complaint, you're going to type out.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm just recopying my notes.
Yeah.
Okay. My other question is, what hoops do I have to jump through? For example, telling the principal my concerns, telling the superintendent, telling so-and-so, or can I just file?
Just file.
Thank you.
Do I train groups of advocates or SEAC members? I do. We do all of that. So we have a 2-day training that's on demand. We have the 2-day training that's going to be live in person, just outside of Orlando, June 7th and 8th and July 19th and 20th. And I train school districts on being amazing. And then this is the last one. My question is, how can I present my evidence of the forgery to OCR in a way that might prompt reconsideration of their compliance? OCR is not going to do forgery. They're just not going to do that. Okay, this is the last one, Carmen. My question is, what state can I review related to this district? X created a district policy on having all recommendations for AT to go through the special educator first prior to the meeting. This did not sit well with me because it sounds like they could say no and does not mean they recommendation. Yeah, I mean, they have the right to interoffice all of their evaluations to each other. That's but we should make decisions based upon what the data says and what the law shows. So thanks you guys for being on. We'll be on in the next time that we're on, because we'll be on then. This will be on Special Education Academy YouTube. Go and like, subscribe, follow, share, do all the things. And remember, we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. We'll see you guys in the next training.